It's Friday, so we've got our party insider standing by to talk about week 2 of the election campaign and how President Trump is affecting this race. But first, let's take another look at those closing market numbers from today. These are the main U.S. indexes. They all tanked for a second straight day. The Dow, the NASDAQ, and the S&P 500 all suffered their biggest 2-day losses since March 2020. When COVID-19 shut down the global economy. The NASDAQ has now entered a bear market, meaning it's 20% below its peak. On the campaign trail, all the party leaders were in Quebec this morning, vowing to protect Canadians from President Trump.
This is a time when we need to come together as a country. We are coming together as a country. What we're offering as the Liberal government is a positive plan, a plan of action that Canadians can rally behind.
He was the economic advisor to Justin Trudeau while they doubled the debt, doubled housing costs, and delivered the worst inflation in 40 years. We need a change, folks. We can't go on spending money we don't have on things we don't need.
And this time, when people are feeling really worried about what's going to happen next, they're worried about the fact that Donald Trump has threatened our country, they're worried about the trade war, they're worried about what that means for themselves. And so for those folks, I'm saying, we'll vote for a New Democrat then, because we're going to fight to protect the things that matter to you.
Okay, it's Friday. That means our party insiders are here. Melanie Richer is a former communications director for the NDP. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial advisor. And Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. Good to see you all. It's the end of the second week, Fred. Feels like the end of the second year of this campaign. How have things moved, shifted, or locked in since we were all here a week ago, in your view?
Well, I think, when Trump brought in the tariffs to most of the world, and some to us, but not everything, I think we've seen messaging shift.
One second. Is Fred's mic going, guys? No. Okay, all right. We're going to come back to you, Fred. There's something going on with your mic. Mel, let's try you. How do you think it's locked in? Let's figure out if Fred is turned on or just not coming up. Go ahead.
Yeah, second week, it's feeling a little bit like it's solidifying a bit. Obviously, it's only week 2 of 5, so there's still a lot of time to change. And like you just mentioned, there's debates coming too, and what will happen in debates will be interesting to see whether or not it shifts. The other thing that I think could potentially shift is Canadians were waiting for what was going to happen on the 2nd, and it wasn't as bad as we were expecting, which is really great. But does that then change the conversation a little bit as it relates to Trump? Is that still the thing that everybody's paying attention to, or do things like healthcare? Do we start talking a little bit more about affordability and housing as part of the conversation? That's, I think, still to be seen. I think that'll probably be a week 3 thing. But it is, the messages of all campaigns are locked in a little bit and starting to shift to what that Election Day question or Election Day message will be.
Fred, do you have any thoughts on where things are a week in?
Well, as I was saying, or trying to say, the issue, I think the Conservatives have adapted now to the ballot question. We've seen Poilievre over the last few days take a different tone with Trump and tariffs, something that I think he should have been doing the last number of weeks. His policies and all of the things that he has, I don't think he needs to change, but the preamble before he announces it needs to say why this is going to help us with the Trump situation. And I think he's finally there doing it. And I do think the ballot question, no matter what happened this week, is still going to be Trump and tariffs. Obviously, as a Conservative, we'd love it to be affordability and the thing that they've led on for 2 years. But Trump is just not going to go away, particularly with what's happening in the rest of the world now that he's declared a world economic war, not just against us.
Greg, how do you see it?
I'll believe it when I see it if the Conservative leader has actually pivoted, because we've had this telegraphed for a long time. Look, I was sitting in this very chair the day that Chrystia Freeland resigned, and I watched Poilievre talk about Carney. And, we've got a lot of time to fill in days like that, and it popped right into my head, this person has an inability to pivot. So the challenge, I recognize what Fred is saying, but the challenge is there's campaign issues that obscure that. They've lost a lot of candidates. My guess is that the Liberals may still have some candidate issues too, but the Liberals have put this together pretty fast. I mean, we, in 2 months, got rid of a leader and got a new one. You guys usually took over 2 years. We're much more efficient at that than you.
Your vote efficiency and your coup efficiency, you've got it knocked there.
Much better. But I do hear noise like in that clip, he just said he was advising Trudeau. But then you have other Conservatives saying that Mark Carney was gone for 10 years. But then you have other Conservatives saying he's responsible for everything in the last 10 years. So to me, it's a mess of noise, and we'll see if he actually has the message and discipline that he used to show in order to maintain that.
Okay, yeah, we'll see if the signal can punch through on the noise. But I want to show the audience where the polls are right now. We update the poll tracker as things come in, and right there you can see in the horse race as it is, Mark Carney with that 43.6% lead, Pierre Poilievre at 37.7% with the Conservatives. And then you see the NDP way back at 8.2%, the Bloc Québécois at 5.5%, and the Greens at 2.3%. So look, if that keeps going, Fred, that is a Liberal majority government of some consequence, probably in the 180s, based on how we would look at it now. You can see them hitting 150 before they get to the Manitoba border, and then it's whatever they can do out there. So I know Mr. Poilievre is speaking more about Trump, speaking more about tariffs, but he's still weaving it in with a lot of the Liberal lost decade and keeping those things together. Yeah. How do you think that is? Is that enough of a shift? Do you know what I mean? For people to really see it.
Well, we'll have to find out. But I would say, like, I don't agree that he pivoted to begin. I think he's adapting. He's looking at where he's going. He's putting his messages. He is still hitting, the greatest hits. He's going out there with all of his points. The stuff he's been running on for 2 years. I do think that's a bit of a muddied message now, and it's hard to punch through on what really, really matters and what people are worried about. So it is going to be hard. He's got so many things, and He's looking at Carney as his opponent, and we know he is, but in reality it's each leader versus Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. How do you stack up against that person? That is what I think most Canadians are going to be voting on in the ballot box, and that's what he needs to adapt more and get into that in a bit of a stronger way.
Well, Amel, that's the challenge. It's just the enormous shadow, coming over this election, coming over thousands of people losing their jobs, at least temporarily, and who knows for how long there. Mm-hmm. And it's tilted the board in favor of the incumbent, right? Because Mark Carney, we've spent years talking about how incumbents can't win, and all of a sudden it's the big advantage to be able to campaign as the incumbent and from the Prime Minister's podium. We saw that a lot this week, right, to help lock in that impression. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. A lot of taken on the role that whoever is going to be taking on in a few short weeks. And it's hard to criticize him for doing that, right? I think we saw, I can't remember what Poilievre said exactly, but he was like, yeah, he's doing his thing. And Jagmeet kind of said the same thing, right? Like, we're on Team Canada. We want Canada to do well. And right now, Mark Carney is the one kind of leading the ship for all intents and purposes. So you're not going to start cheering against ourselves just because we're in an election. So it is hard. When you're up against Trump. I also think, though, that and I know I've been saying this for a few weeks, so I might sound like a broken record a little bit, but you talk about job losses, and of course that's something that all leaders are going to talk about, but there is one leader who has been on the side of workers and has always been on the side of workers, and that's Jagmeet, in good times and in bad times, and I think that's the opportunity for the NDP, and we're seeing that as part of how he positions his message when everybody's talking about is just Trump, is when Trump does what he's going to do, who's making sure that as part of that conversation, working people are part of it. And I think you've seen a little bit of a shift with the NDP's message this week, is less as Prime Minister, I'm going to do this, but as leader, I will make sure that people don't forget about you, because Mark Carney's not, his track record or the way that he's talking about is not very worker focused, is not very, we're going to invest in making sure EI is strong enough for people. So I think you're seeing that subtle shift in messaging from the NDP to say, hey, when the chips are down and you need somebody at that table to stand up for you, that'll be me.
We are going to talk more about that a little bit later in this hour, because we've got a report coming in from David Thurton, who's with the NDP campaign. But Greg, just part of the Conservative strategy here, while they evolve, adapt, pivot, whatever verb we want to use there, they're also trying to microwave Mark Carney, right? I mean, that seems pretty clear. And we saw it with the NDP today, saying they're going to go after, tax shelters and these sorts of things, like a policy they're bringing up specifically because of Mark Carney. So what do the Liberals need to do to stop this evisceration of his reputation? Because that seems to be the path to a more competitive election for his rivals here.
Well, in one aspect, I'm not sure they have to do anything. I looked at my RSPs today. I'm sorry I did. I think if you have pensions, you're worried about this stuff. And so when you start talking about some of these investment firms that are taking care of teachers' pensions, my brother, my sister-in-law, lots of other people. So I think, Fred, you said it, quite aptly earlier. People are really focused on this part of it, and so I'm not sure that is resonating the way that people want to. We're going to talk about the NDP later, but I find often when I am watching an NDP clip, it sounds like what I just heard from Pierre Poilievre. And I'm not sure that is working, in blue-orange. So yes, they are trying to microwave Mark Carney. The other thing that they're really going after, you can tell what they're hearing. The Director of Communications for the Conservative Party tweeted last night something about Mark Carney's resume. And it is that, I thought that was a huge gift to the Liberal war room, because she has confirmed what Conservatives think is their biggest hurdle. What they're hearing is their biggest hurdle, is that Mark Carney has the experience to deal with the moment right now. So that is, they're attacking a whale there. It's an enormous amount of experience that he has. And this is the same group of people that criticized Justin Trudeau for being a teacher 10 years ago, and now they're criticizing, an economist.
Okay, Mel, you wanted to
just quickly to push back on Greg a little bit on the sounding like Conservatives. Tax fairness has always been one of the top three things that New Democrats have cared about, along with healthcare. And the reason that that's an important conversation is when you look at his company, $5.3 billion. When you hear $5.3 billion and $5.3 billion investing into our economy, into protecting healthcare, into EI to protect workers, into reducing costs for people, $5.3 billion is a lot of money. So I hear you on the making sure your attacks stick, but when folks in my universe hear that he was head of a company that was doing that, how can you trust that he's going to, attack attack wage equity, make sure investors...
I heard that message from Mr. Singh today. He talked about the $5 billion, and he said, talked about how many more streetcars you could buy. Well, that's really going to resonate well with people in rural Canada. So obviously the focus of that was trying to preserve whatever strength they have still in downtown Toronto.
I think that was item number 4 on his list, and healthcare and homes.
But again, it's not
that,
something that anybody I grew up with has, we don't have a lot of streetcars in Atlantic Canada.
No, but they are missing
fair. But why are you talking about streetcars? Because you want the people who have streetcars to vote for you. You're not looking anywhere else when you talk about those things.
But hold on. He said family doctors, he said affordable homes, and he said streetcars as part of that, because streetcars also attacks the climate crisis, right? Like, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing.
Fred, normally I need Mel to break you and Greg up. I need you to break them up now. I mean, your thoughts, you're enjoying this? You want to see more of this, right, over the next 20-odd days. But, on that, I mean, there is... this does seem to be, there are two reasons why the Liberals are up, right? Trump and Carney, if you look at the data. So you got to find a way to deal with Trump. They need to find a way to dirt up Carney, right? So, I mean, how do they do this over the next little while to make him look less like sort of the reason, the person people want to take on Donald Trump?
I think the only way is at the debates. That's the only way we'll see him fail. I don't think any of the ads are working. They haven't worked. Calling him carbon tax, Carney didn't stick. All these other things, the Brookfield thing, it's convoluted and hard to understand. I think the debates is an opportunity. Let's see how does he perform. Yeah. And there's going to be two of them, French and then English. How does we haven't really seen Carney. We've seen them do statements. We've seen him do some things, but actually there with the other leaders talking about the issues, and there'll be a number of issues to talk about. He can't just say, I'm just focused on the economy and nothing else. He's got to address other items. So it'll be interesting, and it's an opportunity for Poilievre, and of course it's a risk for Poilievre as well. Things could go sideways for any leader.
But if you go super aggressive in the debate, people may say, oh, that you won, but often you sometimes look too hot. You look too, this
is a risk.
So how do you bring him down without being full attack dog, in a debate?
I don't know how you do that.
That's the challenge, isn't it?
I don't know. But again, it's how Carney responds to him as well in the debate. I think that's going to be quite telling.
I think there's something else there too, is that Carney has, one of your guests called him Teflon in Quebec this week. I think because Canadians know that he is not a traditional politician, and then it won't last forever, but they are giving him, they're marking him, grading him on a curve. And so if Poilievre does your typical political stuff, in a debate, it might not work because Canadians don't want it to work for somebody who is brand new to politics.
To your point, though, he is being marked on a curve. People are giving him the benefit of the doubt, and the debate will be an opportunity to see if how good he really is.
Okay, Mark Carney spent a lot of time down there. We're going to look at his campaign today because Liberal leader Mark Carney is back on the campaign trail after being in Ottawa to announce Canada's retaliation against those U.S. tariffs. Carney began his day today in Montreal, where he laid out his plan for CBC and Radio-Canada. It was then wheels up for the GTA. Carney headed to Woodbridge, Ontario to tour, appropriately, an auto manufacturing plant, and then to Scarborough for a rally tonight.
If elected, my government will take action to enshrine and protect and strengthen CBC Radio-Canada for generations to come.
Carney says he would increase funding to the public broadcaster and make that funding statutory. That means any changes would have to be approved by Parliament, not just Cabinet. He said having a strong CBC and Radio-Canada is important at a time when Canada's sovereignty is under threat. The CBC's Olivia Stefanovich has more. Olivia.
David, Liberal leader Mark Carney spent the morning here in Montreal, where he outlined a new plan for CBC Radio-Canada. Carney is pitching a new mandate for the public broadcaster and new money. He says he wants to give CBC an initial annual funding increase of $150 million. The extra money, he says, would bring CBC's budget closer to that of other public broadcasters around the world, in a sense leveling the playing field. And Carney, while he was here in Quebec, he did not make any notable gaffes as he has on previous Quebec stops, even as his opponents continue to try to attack his credibility and French language skills. The Liberals are holding a significant lead in the polls here. CBC's poll tracker shows that Carney is ahead 20 points over the Bloc Québécois and Conservatives, David.
Thank you, Olivia. This is CBC's Olivia Stefanovich in Montreal. Okay, the CBC pitch today. This is something, Fred, help me understand something. We know why the Liberals are doing this. They believe in the CBC, they like the CBC.
And they're doing it to counter Poilievre's.
That's where I wanted to go with it. Pierre Poilievre, not as big of a fan. He was asked about this today, and he said, my plan won't hurt Radio-Canada, because he does want to defund English CBC, though he has not said that once on the campaign trail. There was one rally in Hamilton where he made a reference to turning the broadcast centre in Toronto into affordable housing. Why do you think that is being so unhighlighted when it was like a big fundraising thing for him leading into it? And are the Liberals trying to wedge him here?
The Liberals are clearly trying to wedge him here. He's been hammering this since he launched his leadership campaign, even before he was leader. He adopted the previous leader's policy to fund the CBC. He didn't come up with it. And he's hammered it for the last 2 years. So he's mentioned it in rallies. Maybe it was just one, but I think it's still a part of...
We have checked. He has not mentioned it.
But he said he did one.
He made one reference to turning the broadcast center into affordable housing, but that's it.
It's likely, I mean, he's got so many issues that he's been hammering on for the last number of years. I don't know what kind of a vote getter it really is outside of the Conservative base either, which he's trying to grow.
That's what I'm wondering, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's in a leadership race. When Aaron O'Toole won, he ran on defund the CBC, and that was something that really there was a lot of people who want within the Conservative world reform to the CBC. It doesn't mean defund doesn't mean necessarily completely destroy, but fix it and put it. Right now it's competing with private broadcasters, and there's a way to find, maybe with local news and more of the stuff that actually Carney pointed out today. Maybe there is a way for it to survive in that world where it has a refocused purpose.
Who ran Aaron O'Toole's leadership campaign? Yeah, all right.
I am the author. I can show you. I am the author of the Defund the CBC.
And yet we have you on every Friday just to show you that we can all rise above it. Greg, what do you think of this? I mean,
what do I think of Fred?
No.
It's going to get a lot of.
There's a CBC song right behind you.
Carney, as I understand it, was supposed to do this a week ago, but he had the phone call with Trump and all of those things changed the itinerary a little bit. But here it is, $150 million to CBC Radio-Canada, but it is not coupled with the provision that Pascal Saint-Onge had recommended of funding us to the point, us as the company, so that we don't sell ads anymore, and the private networks get to go after the ad revenue, and we stop competing with them in that space, which seems like a reasonable position for the former Heritage Minister to put on the table. It's not there. What do you make of this?
I have no insight into, I've not talked to anybody about those specifics. I just do that qualification. I think that my expectation is that Mark Carney wants to see the books What would this actually mean? Are we looking at a PBS model where it's telethons? What does this actually mean? He needed to send a message today to a lot of Canadians that support the CBC that he's on side, and he's done that. I've seen the Friends of CBC Facebook group. They are very excited about this. And just in terms of my point of view, look, this is where, once again, I revealed that I was alive when dinosaurs ruled the earth. But I grew up in small town, rural Nova Scotia, where I was, probably in grade 3 before the competing network put a transmitter on a nearby mountain. So I grew up with one channel, or my father would remind us 2 channels because he was a Habs fan. We got French CBC.
CBC French, that's where we watched, yeah.
The first election I worked was 1988, free trade election. I was in parts of this country that the only thing you could get on a car radio is CBC Radio. Nancy Karatek Lindell is a new senator. She's a former MP from Nunavut. She told me once that it took her 2 years to get to every community in her riding, but every day, because of CBC, she could speak to her constituents in her own language. So I think this is what the Conservatives forgot. And also this weird promise about, well, we'll leave Radio Can. I did your show in June from Halifax. I hadn't been in the new studio.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there and I'm chatting with the technician, mention it, and he points over his shoulder. There's a sign that says French Quarter. That part of the newsroom.
Yeah, it's like New Orleans.
Right?
Yeah.
So it was a dumb promise, a dumb way to make it. And the Toronto Star has pointed out, he's been very quiet on this because it's not a winner.
So, Mel, though, they seem to be, we all know the future of the public broadcaster is going to be an issue of some sort in this debate, but they are wrapping it up in the Donald Trump threat to sovereignty, culture, and all this sort of thing. Is that an effective play, effective communication play, or do you think it's a bit cynical to do it that way? What's your thoughts?
No, I don't think so. I think that's fair. I think in the age of disinformation, CBC is the tie to many communities, tied to news, tied to information. Particularly, we've got so many local newspapers who have shut their doors or who are reporting once a week or even less than that. So I think it makes sense. But I do think it's most Canadians don't like this, and the fact that Pierre Poilievre has talked about it so much, while it may work with the base, I don't think regular folks like it. And I think it's a contrast of. This is a reasonable thing to do and highlights the fact that Pierre Poilievre doesn't have a reasonable position on it.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about the Conservative campaign now because leader Pierre Poilievre, well, he was in Trois-Rivières, Quebec today, where he pledged to crack down on domestic violence.
My Conservative government will ensure bars and victims stay safe. We will lock up violent abusers longer to keep them away from children and women, and we will bring home the safe communities that Canadians deserve.
Poilievre says he will create a new criminal offense for intimate partner violence that leads to tougher sentencing. He also said he would ensure first-degree murder convictions for anyone who kills a partner or child. The CBC's Evan Dyer has been following the Conservative campaign this week. Evan.
David, today in Trois-Rivières, the Conservative campaign was focused on an important issue in Quebec, which is intimate partner violence. Pierre Poilievre promised to introduce a new offence in the criminal code of assaulting an intimate partner, and also said that anyone charged with that would be denied bail and would have to stay in jail until their case is decided in court. He also said he'd remove a provision from the Canada Criminal Code that allows a person to claim that a murder was a crime of passion. I should say that this is our last day with the Conservative campaign, and we have faced some very tough message control from the party, not only breaking with tradition in the sense that we are not allowed to accompany the campaign, but also we've seen great control over the questions. We have not been allowed to ask any questions during the week that we've been with the Conservatives. Today we made an effort to get a question, and they told us that we could ask one, but that it had to be my colleague Tom Parry who asked the question. We responded that I was the one who had the question and we preferred that I asked it. At that point they took our question away and gave it to another outlet. We've also seen efforts to find out what reporters are going to ask, to pressure them to reveal what their question will be before the news conference. And of course, that's asked before the party decides who gets to ask a question. And we've also seen some fairly heavy-handed treatment by Conservative Party staffers, including some pushing and shoving, as we saw on the public wharf at Petty Harbour in Newfoundland. So it's been a difficult week. It's difficult to get the same level of accountability from the Poilievre campaign as it has been from past Conservative campaigns or from the other parties in this election campaign. David.
All right, Evan, thank you. That's the CBC's Evan Dyer in Trois-Rivières, Quebec. Mel, start with you on that. I mean, that was an interesting insight today that they offered Tom Parry the question. They said, no, Evan wants to ask the question. And then they took it away, and I believe the Globe and Mail was given the question. this asking what you're going to ask in advance and then deciding if you get it, like it is, we were promised when the media was not allowed on the plane the most open and transparent campaign. This is not what that is.
It's
like by any standard, this is not what that is. You can tell us usually you have this much time or we'll take this many questions, but you don't ever, ever, ever tell them in advance what you're doing, right?
Totally. And it's just like if you think you're running a good campaign, if you've got the issues that people want to talk about, you should have no problem defending them. You should have no problem giving details about them. You should have no problem taking questions, being held accountable, giving the details that folks are asking for, because that's the job that journalists are doing. Journalists are asking questions that people at home want to know. And the fact that you know, it drives me bananas, and we've had this conversation again at this table and outside, that you want, you know, journalists to show up and you want journalists to cover what you got to say. But God forbid they have questions, because folks at home have questions, you're not going to answer them. And then the flip side is if journalists don't show up to cover it, well, then the journalist is unfair to me and I'm not getting equal coverage. So there's no winning. And really the big losers of not being able to ask Pierre Poilievre questions are Canadians, because they want to make an informed choice. They want to figure out what policy pieces that people are talking about. They want to know that the leaders are standing up for them, and the fact that that's happened, it's ridiculous. On so many levels.
Yeah. Well, and then we get jammed into this weird spot, like let's not make it about us, it's inside baseball. But you know, Fred, after the Petty Harbour thing, I think it was Tuesday that happened in my home province, I heard about it, not just from the CBC people. Like I watched it, I'm like, I know that person, you know, sort of thing. And like people were grabbed and moved, and this is a wharf in Petty Harbour outside of a, you know, aquarium touch tank stuff. I mean, what is this? You don't let the media, not you, but not letting the media travel and then physically moving them. That's a whole different level, it seems.
Yeah, and the questions, picking who gets to ask questions is odd. I totally appreciate limiting how many questions, because you're trying to get your message out and you have other events to get to and there's a time.
And every campaign does that.
Yeah,
right?
and I
every
remember
single campaign.
In the 2011 campaign, we went to 5 questions
Yep.
when Harper was our leader and Prime Minister. And there was a lot of process stories that came from that, though, right? Like the gallery was pushing back, and when they did become the story themselves.
Was
They were
that
making
5
the
with
story.
follow-up or just 5?
I don't recall exactly.
Right, because this is 4 no follow-up, this
Right.
campaign.
There's
Anyway,
probably no follow-up. You know, I understand what they're trying to do in terms of limiting the amount of time and just try to focus your message. But again, picking journalists who get to ask questions, I just never heard of that in this type of a context.
Yeah, it's strange. Greg, your thoughts there?
Well, I mean, if we had just stayed with what the Conservative leader talked about, I wouldn't have a lot to criticize. I live in a city where the Ottawa Police Service started using the term femicide last year. Intimate partner violence in 2024, I think over 6,000, 3,500 charges. But we're not, because we're talking about, you know, only tailors see the seams. Well, the seams of that campaign are showing really, really strongly. Don't lay hands on a reporter. It is easily, you know, that can easily get out of hand, and then there's an assault charge, and then we're not talking about anything that you said that day.
I don't think it got anywhere close to that.
No,
I want to make
but there
that
was
very
a time
clear. His hands,
under Harper, I'm trying to remember the name of the journalist, where she was whirled around and she shoved him back. I'm trying to remember. It was a French reporter, but like this always comes up with the Conservatives. With Harper, they were actually, it wasn't just that they were restricted to the questions, they were in a pen. And there was this great wide shot. There was nobody else there. A pen the size of this, and all the reporters shoved inside. And if this over control, as Mel said, if you're not confident in your message, you end up with a process story.
Yeah, look, every campaign does put a limit and a restriction. We don't want you here, we don't want you there. But even at these big rallies where there's 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people, you're penned into a place. You're not allowed to do interviews with anyone. If you try to do an interview with a supporter, you know, you're threatened with being kicked out or shoved back. It's a very strange sort of thing. But, you know, just to move it just beyond that for a second, Fred, I want to go back to what we were talking about earlier in the show about the doing damage to Carney sort of thing. Can Pierre Poilievre continue to be his own attack dog and do that? Because he did it to Trudeau, right? He was the prosecutor.
And it worked.
And it worked. But right now, his negatives are in a different place in the polling. He's lower than the party, you know, his choice for prime minister. Can he keep being the guy who goes at Carney and raise his own chances of becoming prime minister?
It's tough because in political science 101 and when you're running campaigns, you never have your leader as the attack dog. You have them as the statesman, and you have someone else do it. And Poilievre was incredibly effective for years doing that under Harper's leadership. And his leadership, though, when he won the leadership and then prosecuting Trudeau the way he did, shows that he could do it at that level. But now into a campaign, once the writ drops, the air feels different. Everything changes and people look at people different. You're not leader of the opposition anymore. You're now running for prime minister. So I think there is a bit of issue there where it would be better if he had more of his caucus out there doing the attacks if you're going to do those. At the end of the day, I think Poilievre should be showing how he can take on Trump. And I don't think talking about Carney is how he could do that.
Right. Mel, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, it's a different situation for Jagmeet Singh, you know, but if you are Pierre Poilievre and you are the front runner to replace the current prime minister, can you be the enforcer at the same time?
I don't think so, and I don't think so when folks already think that you're that person. Like when all they hear from you all the time is the attacks, and that's all they've heard from you. Eventually, and we've talked about this a few times, eventually folks need you to start talking about the solution and focus on the solution. And I think that has been hard for Pierre Poilievre to do, or to do sincerely. And he's not the first. I think I worked on the 2015 campaign, and Tom Mulcair had the same issue where he was the prosecutor in the House, and then he was kind of the guy who smiled weird afterwards when he was campaigning, right? So there is a difficulty there to pivot when you're so used to being taking on that role and being good at prosecuting the case. But definitely that has been one of the, I think, reasonable folks at home who really tune in during the elections and don't consider themselves partisan are waiting for that, are waiting for what's your vision of what Canada looks like instead of just prosecuting the case against the other guy. Nobody loved a Tom Mulcair joke as much as Tom Mulcair. He would make the joke and then kind of turn and laugh like Mr. Roper used to do in Three's Company. He used to remind me of that. But Greg, on this, the Poilievre attack, like he's the apex predator of question period, right? He hunts down and destroys the prey. He just did that to Justin Trudeau. But there's something, I'm assuming, in the Liberal data or the Liberal focus group that they know people don't want it in this moment, because Mark Carney keeps talking about negativity doesn't win a trade war, negativity doesn't solve a problem. And they're putting that in people's minds so that when they see the negative attack coming from Poilievre, they're trying to link those two thoughts together. It seems to me that is his shield against this.
Yeah, I don't know if it's data-driven or just your gut. I mean, when you have people talking to you about politics that have never talked to you about politics, and when we get outside of Ottawa, is what I'm talking about, and seeing the people that have signed up for this, to get involved in this election. I think people, they're just, they're hearing from the ground up from their candidates, this is what people are thinking of. I hear from a lot of people, former journalists, others, that they can't understand that there's, and we're really helping Poilievre, right? There's all these panels every week of what he should be doing, and then he kind of does what we tell him to do. But
I do not think that is what is happening.
Taking notes.
You're welcome to come on the show and watch the show.
I'll do it.
I think they don't come on the show so they don't miss anything.
Well, that's it. Yes, they want to watch it instead.
So,
that makes sense.
But, there's no team around him. The only other person that they really seem to put out a lot, they put out Melissa Lantsman a little bit, is Andrew Scheer. And Andrew Scheer is a guy who criticized somebody else for having dual citizenship. He has a dual citizenship for the United States, said he was going to get rid of it, and then he reversed on that. So how do you put that person out to talk about U.S.-Canada relations? You can't. We're not talking about he's the prime minister in waiting anymore. We're talking about the polls. So we're certainly not going to be talking about who he's putting in cabinet right now. But he tweets a lot, the Conservative leader. He is his own attack dog. And it's not usually, as you said, Fred, it's not usually the way it goes. And I'm not sure it's working.
So Fred, just to close the loop on this, because I want to get to Jagmeet Singh and his campaign today. I mean, it has worked to the point that he had a 25-point lead a few months ago, right? So you believe in this process because it took you to the top. Right. So is the adapt, the evolve, the pivot, whatever, is there a way to do that now at this point? Because it seems this is just who Pierre Poilievre is as a politician.
It is, but I think he has to realize that, I've said a number of times now, Trudeau was his opponent, Carney's not. It is Trump. Canadian voters, when they go to the polls, for the most part, at least the ones that we're, trying to win over so that we can win the election, are going to be looking at who can deal with Donald Trump. That is the ballot question. It's a very simple ballot question right now. And if you're talking about the other guys so much, and I will say, it's interesting, Carney has pivoted in some regard here, because the day he launched the election, when he called it, He mentioned Poilievre like 16 times in his opening statement. He was very negative, talked about negativity and then attacked Poilievre over and over and over. So he was doing it himself then, but then he seems to have, he's using, similar to what Doug Ford did, the trappings of government where you're out there being the statesman. He's shifted into that, and that works much better, I think, right now. Trump is the opponent, and whoever can make that case best will win this election.
Okay, we're going to check in with the NDP now. Leader Jagmeet Singh, he began his day just outside of Montreal, because they were all in Quebec, promising to introduce measures to crack down on the use of international tax havens. Singh then headed into the city for a meet and greet at a bagel shop.
We believe that if you make a profit in Canada, you should be able to contribute back to this country. You should be able to contribute to the services that allows your company to make money in the first place.
Singh said he would make companies prove why they are registering accounts in another country and would end tax agreements with tax havens like Bermuda. The CBC's David Thurton is covering the NDP for us this week, and he says he has noticed a shift in the NDP leader's messaging. David.
David, I'm going to tell you about something reporters traveling with Jagmeet Singh have been noticing. Over the last couple of days, the NDP leader has dropped a line he's been saying for some time, that he's running to be Prime Minister. As far as I can tell, the last time he said this was on the weekend. Since then, Singh has modified his messaging, saying instead it would be his honor to serve as Prime Minister. Talking about as well why it's essential to elect as many New Democrats as possible. Emphasizing how much the NDP has achieved in the last two minority parliaments with its MPs. It's a subtle change, but maybe significant. Less confident expectations, more modest ones. It's likely because the NDP leader is seeing where Canadians are at, plus where the party is in the polls. David.
All right, thank you, David. That's the CBC's David Thurton in Montreal. Okay, Mel, what do we make of this? Because you obviously have to start the campaign thinking you can be Prime Minister.
Totally.
But are we getting to the point where the NDP say, let's push for a minority and give us the balance? Where do you think this is going? Because it is moving.
Yeah. I think it's obviously too early still to concede and say that you're not going to be Prime Minister, but I think the shift is important, and it's important in doing exactly that pitch, in the minority government pitch. And what folks at the party were saying to me was that when they're talking to orange-blue voters who have locked in for Pierre Poilievre, it is clear that if they think that Mark Carney is going to have a majority, they want to send NDP MPs to Ottawa to keep the Liberals accountable. And on the flip side, it's almost the same thing. For orange-red voters, what I'm told is that when those voters who are locked in on Mark Carney are not worried about Pierre Poilievre winning, they also feel like they can vote for what they want, which is an NDP MP, because they see that NDP MPs were able to push the government to get more done for people. So I think that's what we're hearing in the, every additional MP that you send to Ottawa is somebody who can go get more for you. And I'm sure, we're going to start hearing we got all of this done with 25. Imagine, what we could get done if we had 30 or 40 or, more than that. And while it may seem like you're taking yourself out of the race a little bit, it's not. I think it's really shoring that support and giving people permission to vote for what they want, which we know that folks still like Jagmeet. They like the things that the NDP has gotten for them in the last few years, and giving them permission to really lean in. Don't worry, Poilievre's not going to win if that's what you're worried about, and send us to Ottawa to make sure that that government works for you.
Fred, a Conservative victory depends on a pretty resilient NDP, and the polls are not showing that right now. So what goes through the Conservative campaign's mind when they hear the shift going in Jagmeet Singh's language towards more about maintaining a presence rather than winning?
Yeah, well, look, the last two campaigns we lost was because the NDP bottomed out in the last 3 or 4 days of the campaigns in 2019 and 2021. We were leading both those campaigns in the last 3 days. The vote shifted to the Liberals to stop us. So that is something that is always of mind.
It's gone there early now, though, Fred,
Exactly.
because of Trump. So what makes it go back and then stay back?
And half of their support that they still have is still super soft. The NDP has the softest support, despite being only at 8%. What makes it go back? They need a leader who's not Jagmeet Singh. He is...
well, I mean in this campaign. I
think it's not going to happen. There is nothing that he is going to do. This is his third campaign. He's still not sure what his message is. He does not give any confidence to Canadians. He is not a Jack Layton or a Tom Mulcair.
Can I refute that a little bit? Because if we remove Trump from the election and you were to watch Jagmeet campaign the way that he's been campaigning this election, I would say it's actually his best campaign. He's super strong every time he talks. He's super solid on what he's saying. His proof points are good. He's seemed more confident in this election than he has over the last few months, when arguably he had more to say as it relates to the supply and confidence agreement. So I think if you actually remove Trump, I don't think that that's true at all. If folks had the oxygen that you would have in a normal election, I think people would be saying that Jagmeet's running an excellent campaign. So I don't think that that's actually fair to say.
I do want to come into that. We only got about 2.5 minutes left. So, Greg, just your thoughts on this, in terms of what this means. I do want to come back to Mel for a final point here.
Well, if Trump wasn't in this, Liberals might be sitting in a different place too. Yeah.
Fair.
So the thing that I don't understand is I think that Jagmeet is incredibly likable, and we see polling that Poilievre is not. And I do not understand why the NDP are not. If you're damn you, David Thurton, because I had noticed that earlier. Our friend Anne McGrath, early in the campaign or just before, was asked about this. Comes up all the time. So it's something that the NDP had to be prepared for. Mel and I have talked about this. There's something in the ad, the living room ad of Singh, that bothers me, where he says Mark Carney, his entire career has been, hurting workers. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact quote.
Right.
And this is a person who actually worked as a senior bureaucrat for the government of Canada and was also governor of the Bank of Canada. So no, I don't think his entire career has been devoted to hurting workers. Right. I think he needs to get off those messages and start saying, we fought for dental care, we got it for you, send us back, we'll keep doing that.
But you still need to make the choices clear, right? You need to show people who has their back when the chips are down.
But put that choice against Poilievre, blue-orange writings.
But Greg, I'm telling you, it also works against Mark Carney. It also works to persuade those orange-red voters to say, you need us to stand up to this guy. So it is actually massively important. I know you don't like it, and I get that you don't like it.
I would say that polls would say no to that.
I disagree.
Here's a quick question I have to ask as the final point on this. So that means don't jump in, guys. There's been this rush of NDP voters early to the Liberals because of Trump. If they start to go back and it makes Poilievre look more likely to win, why would they stay? Because that's the two things they seem intent on stopping. Is Trump was stop number one, and Poilievre is stop number two. So they seem caught, really stuck, the NDP do, between these two outcomes, and it seems to favor Carney and his Liberals.
I don't think it's something that happens this week. I don't think it happens next week, and then there's that, what do we do? I think this is a last week. This is a last push.
And do the Liberals have to look inevitable for that to happen, in your view?
They probably need to look inevitable, because that's what it sounds like from both conservative voters or orange-blue voters and orange-red voters. So I do think that that's probably helpful to the NDP to, again, give folks permission to vote for them. But it is, again, important to say who is standing with you and who has shown that they don't. So that's why you're seeing that language. And
contrast,
again, I'll point to, I know I sound like a broken record, and I don't want to rely on this because I don't think that that's smart either, but what happened in Ontario, right? The NDP knows where their support is. They know who those people are. They know how to talk to those people and push them out to the polls. And that's what, campaigns, particularly NDP MPs, are doing across the country.
Okay, we got to leave it there. The hour flies by. Fred Delory, Greg McEacher, Melanie Richer, thank you so much.